I just closed on my first house, a brand new box deep in suburbia where every street looked copy-pasted. I didn't care. I was done renting, done with paper-thin walls and surprise inspections. I wanted a door that locked and a space that was mine. The development was huge, hundreds of homes, 5 or 6 floor plans at most, all mirrored and rotated like a puzzle. Most were still empty. The few that were occupied were short-term rentals, suitcases wheeling in on Fridays, trash bins overflowing by Sundays. That meant real neighbors were rare. Silence, though, plenty of that. When I chose my lot, I made one compromise with myself. Pick a place across from someone actually living there. I figured a face to wave it would keep me from going full hermit. Across the street was a young family. Marcus, his wife Elena, and their infant daughter Lily. The day I toured, I knocked, introduced myself, and we talked on the driveway under a hot, white sky. They seemed normal, friendly. We even joked that our houses were twins. Mine was a mirror of theirs. "We'll do cookouts, block parties," Marcus said with a grin. It felt like the start of a neighborhood. For about a week it was. Then Marcus started dropping by right after work. He brought a 6-pack the first night, and I pulled a couple more from my fridge. We watched the game. We talked about lawn care, interest rates, the weird emptiness of the streets after dark. Normal stuff. Except he never brought Elena or Lily over, even when I'd say they were welcome. And any time I suggested we hang at his place, he shut it down. "House is a mess," he'd say, smiling too quick. I started to get the sense that time at my place was his escape hatch. Then one evening, around 5, he came by with a small bottle of whiskey instead of beer. He poured heavy, kept topping me off. Somewhere between his third and my second, the energy shifted. Usually he'd take the far cushion and sprawl. That night, he slid closer. A hand on my shoulder lingered too long. A laugh pressed too near. I stood up fast. I told him straight. I wasn't interested. I wasn't getting in the middle of someone's marriage. His smile crumpled. He said the marriage was already over in everything but paperwork. He said things I didn't want to hear. I asked him to go. He did, red-eyed and quiet. After that, we didn't wave. We didn't nod. We just existed on opposite driveways. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. A few nights later, I was showering before bed when the quiet tipped sideways. I couldn't place it. Just a feeling that the air had shifted. I killed the water and stood still, listening. Something moved lightly outside the bathroom window. Leaf crushed, then nothing. By the time I toweled off and checked the side yard, the mulch was a perfect, undisturbed brown. I told myself I was jumpy. I went to bed. The next week, it happened again. Different night, same hour. The feeling arrived first, then the hush, then the softest scrape near the glass. I checked the slider before turning in and found it unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I locked it again. I didn't sleep much. Daylight made me bold. I started a slow inspection of the house, outside first. Pulling weeds along the bathroom wall, I noticed a dot, small, too neat to be damaged. A hole, about the width of a pen, drilled through the siding at waist height below the bathroom window. In daylight, I couldn't see through. That night, I flipped the bathroom light on and stepped outside. The angle was perfect, a clear, centered view of a shower. My stomach went cold. Whoever drilled it knew exactly where to aim, knew the floor plan, knew my habits, knew my house, because it was their house too, mirrored across the street. I sealed the hole on the spot, then tore through my rooms with a flashlight and a ladder. In the air vent, nothing. On the bookshelf, dust. In a planter by the slider, something. A pinhole lens tucked under a fake leaf. Then another, behind a picture frame in the living room. Another, above the patio light, angled at the door. Each one small, cheap, and cleverly placed. By the time I finished, I had a lined-up row of black plastic eyes on my kitchen island. They looked back at me like beetles. Calling the police would be simple. Obvious. But I kept thinking of Lily, and of Elena's tired smile on the driveway. I didn't want to blow a crater in their lives without making sure. So I tried something else first. I waited until Marcus's truck pulled out in the morning, then walked across the street and knocked. Elena answered with Lily on her hip. Asked if we could talk somewhere private. We sat at her dining table, same layout as mine, just flipped. I slid the bag across to her. unzipped it, and let the cameras speak for themselves. She didn't look surprised. She looked finished, like she'd been waiting for a lever to pull. "He keeps secrets," she said softly. "He thinks no one notices." We talked for a long time. I told her about the hole in the siding, the slider, the nights that didn't feel right. She told me about passwords changed without warning, accounts that didn't add up, and a baby monitor that sometimes clicked when it shouldn't. Here's where my version of the story is different from the rumors and the drama. I didn't touch Elena. We didn't stage anything to be cruel. We did something quieter. We collected proof the right way. She called her sister. I called an attorney friend. We documented everything. Timestamps, photos, the exact placement of every device, the patched hole, even a screenshot of the mirrored floor plan from the builder's site. We stored it all where Marcus couldn't reach it. And we waited. Within a week, Elena had a temporary order, a new lock code, and a plan. Her parents came down. She packed a few bags, took Lily, and left calm as a cloud. The next morning, a process server met Marcus at his driveway. The day after that, a property manager, turns out the loan had been wobbling, put a notice on the door. By month's end, the badge cars I've been hoping not to need did a polite, methodical walkthrough of both houses. I handed over the cameras in a tidy Ziploc. I slept for the first time in weeks. I don't know where Marcus is now. I don't look for his truck. I keep the bathroom window latched and a motion light over the side yard, and I changed every password I own. Sometimes, when the development gets especially quiet and the cul-de-sacs hum with empty air, I stand on my porch and listen to the hush of a neighborhood not quite born yet. It still feels like the back room sometimes, endless and echoing. But the lock on my door is mine. And across the street, in a brighter city, Elena sends the occasional photo of Lily at a splash pad. Sun hat, chubby hands, water flying everywhere. They look safe. That's enough. If you just bought a place like mine, check your sliders, check your vents, walk your perimeter. And if the floor plan across the street matches yours, remember that someone else knows exactly where your walls end and begin. When my wife got pregnant, we knew our one-bedroom apartment had done its job. It was time for something bigger. We stretched our budget and landed a weathered little house in a historic district. Tree-lined streets, porches with creaking swings, and that old timber smell whenever it rained. We could afford it because the previous owner hadn't kept it up. The listing mentioned drywall replacement after a hurricane had pushed water through the eaves. Not ideal, but we told ourselves we'd just live in it, as is for a few years. Our son, Evan, arrived in early spring. As he grew from a crawler into a wobbly walker, he became our accidental home inspector. If there was a draft, he found it. If a floorboard complained, he danced on it. And there was one place in the house that always spooked him: the side hallway. The hallway ran from the living room past a tiny guest bath, past two small bedrooms, then kinked right before a master bedroom, as if the house had changed its mind mid-plan. It was narrow, the kind of tight that made you turn your shoulders without thinking. During my wife Maya's third trimester, she joked that the hallway was judging her belly. After Evan started toddling, he'd hesitate at the threshold, gather himself, then scamper through, often clipping the wall and going down on one knee. He'd pop up, brave again, but the pause never went away. One night, after another hallway tumble, Maya said, "This needs a window." I agreed. And while we were at it, I added, "Let's straighten that weird turn into the bedroom. We could rebuild the closet on the other wall." She had our account, then nodded. "If the price is sane." A few weeks later, a contractor named Luis walked the property with us. Outside, he stopped on the side yard and squinted up at the siding. "Looks like there used to be a window here," he said, tapping an odd rectangle that didn't match the rhythm of the boards. Close up, you could see it a shallow picture frame in the siding with a hairline gap running all the way around it. Out of curiosity, I slipped a finger into the gap and pressed. The whole rectangle shifted. Luis and I glanced at each other. Then I pushed harder. The panel tipped inward and dropped with a hollow clatter. Behind it yawned a hidden chase, an empty space about a foot wide between the exterior siding and the interior drywall. Luis shined a flashlight into the tunnel. To the left, it dead-ended behind new drywall. To the right, the narrow passage seemed to run the length of the hallway, right toward our master bedroom. Neither of us was small enough to fit. This wasn't part of the job, but curiosity is a strong currency in old houses. Louise called a friend, Theo, a wiry guy who did crawlspace work. 2 hours later, Theo arrived with a headlamp, a mask, and a small hammer. He slid in sideways and inched along, phone on speaker, so we could hear him. Drywall dust drifted out in pale clouds. Okay, still going? Okay, there's framing. Hold up. The line went quiet except for Theo's breath and the rattle of his headlamp against studs. Then, oh my God, there's a room, a beat. Wait, there's somebody in here. Hey, where you, Josh? Call the police. I'm coming back. He wriggled out in a panic, eyes huge, hands shaking white with dust. I dialed 911 with Evan on my hip and Maya asking me, what did he say? What did he say? We all backed in the yard and waited, staring at that slit in the wall like it might blink. The police came, then EMS, then 2 plainclothes who talked like they'd seen stranger. They widened the opening and, one by one, eased through the chase to the far end. When they returned, their faces were tight and careful. Behind the drywall kink between the bend in our hallway and the master bath, they had found a box of a room, no bigger than 3 by 6 feet, framed and finished on the secret side. There was a thin mattress, a camp lantern, a stack of adult diapers, protein shakes, and a plastic bin of pill bottles with labels peeled. And a man, alive, quiet, eyes far away, as if trying to keep up with a world that refused to slow down. We learned the rest in pieces. The previous owner, Ray, had an adult son, Cal, with profound disabilities and almost no language. The medical debt had crushed them. When Ray sold the house and moved into a truck, he couldn't afford Cal's residential care. He wouldn't surrender him either. So he did something impossible and wrong. He sealed up the old hallway window, built a narrow maintenance chase, and carved a hidden room at the end of the bend. He brought Cal there at night, stayed for hours, fed and bathed him from a basin, changed him, watched over him by lantern, and then disappeared again before dawn. Neighbors saw a man in a pickup. Nobody questioned a handyman tinkering with a historic place. The drywall from the hurricane repair, it hid the corridor he'd made. I kept thinking of Evan's little stutter step at the hallway's mouth, his body telling him the space was wrong before he had the words. I kept thinking of how many nights I'd walk past, coffee in hand, yawning under that same roof. And someone was there, right there, breathing in dust and darkness 10 feet from where my son slept. The officers couched their phrases: liability, guardianship, state services. They were kind with us. They were gentler with Cal. EMS transported him to the hospital. Social workers found emergency placement. Ray didn't run. He met the police at a diner 2 days later and cried into his coffee like a man who had finally stopped holding up the sky. People asked if we would move. Maya and I sat with it. We thought about selling, about fleeing the hallway, about scrubbing the story off the studs. But the truth was already in the bones. It would go with us either way. We chose to stay. We chose to tell Evan, someday, not now. That compassion doesn't excuse harm, but explains why people do desperate things when they're cornered. And we chose not to press charges. Maybe that was soft. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was both. We tore out the kink in the hallway. We opened the sight line to the bedroom. We framed a big, bright window where the secret panel had been, and sunlight now pours down the corridor like a poured drink. We patched the chase, sealed it in clean lumber, and left a small inscription inside the wall before the drywall went up. Let there be light. Let there be room. Today, Evan is 6, fearless in sock feet, racing toy cars from the living room to our door without a single pause. His little sister, June, toddles after him with a plastic giraffe, bumping along the baseboards. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, I stand at that new window and place my palm flat to the sun-warmed glass. The hallway feels honest now. No secrets, no hum, no wrongness in the air. Just a bright stripe of day, the sound of kids, and a house that finally lets itself breathe. I was 19 when I moved into an apartment with my girlfriend, Lena. She just transferred to Florida State, and I tag along to work remotely and escape my empty hometown. Thanks to pandemic-era policy tangles, her in-person classes didn't start until spring, which pushed our move to January, way outside Tallahassee's normal August lease cycle. We crashed on a friend's couch for a few weeks and hunted nonstop. Finally, we found a place with a mid-February start date. It sat on the outskirts, under heavy trees south of the interstate. Not the best area by any stretch, but it was what we could afford. A 2-bed, 1.5-bath end unit in a tired little triplex at the very bottom of a cul-de-sac. The street was called Ramblewood Court, and our unit tucked so far down the hill it practically hid from the road. The listing photos looked decent enough: warm lamps, wide angles, fresh paint. My biggest mistake was signing without a showing. The property manager kept dodging us, and I just wanted a roof. The day we got the keys, we walked in and my stomach dropped. Professionally cleaned, they'd said. Freshly painted, carpet steamed. Lies. All over the driveway. Junk the last tenant had dumped. Plastic bracelets, sun-bleached dolls, a cracked tricycle, a broken laundry basket. Inside, German cockroaches scattered like pepper flakes every time a cabinet opened. The fridge reeked like a dockside dumpster, empty but glued with brown mystery syrup in every shelf seam. A rain of loose screws and picture hooks hid in the dust on the floors. Even the sink rims had paint crusted over them, like someone rolled the walls with their eyes closed. The carpets were the worst. In our bedroom, they'd been pounded flat and turned a bruised gray-black. Islands of different colored stains told a history we didn't want to read. The rectangular ghost where a bed once stood was so stark I didn't even want my bare feet touching it. Black mold fanned up from the master shower grout and burped out of both sink drains. And the perk of an in-unit washer/dryer? The first wash filled the drum and refused to drain, leaving our clothes stewing in cold, soapy swamp water. We were furious and exhausted. That first night, we told ourselves we'd sleep, then fight the landlord in the morning. But in the dark, everything we'd noticed began stitching itself together. On the inside of our bedroom door, the bottom corner was shredded, deep gouges where a dog had scratched for hours, the varnish gone down to pale wood. In the walls throughout the unit, I counted 50 pushpins, each a tiny grave for a drawing or chore chart or calendar. Outside, children's toys and a glittery hair clip half buried in the mulch. The place felt used up, and not by accident. Neglect lives in the air after a while. Upstairs, the landing had a choke to it. Hard to explain, just a pressure like walking into a small elevator with strangers. We lay in bed, whispering, and both admitted that the top of the stairs felt mean. While we were talking, our eyes drifted toward the sliding closet doors. They were open a few inches. Then Lena sat up too fast and snatched her pillow. "What?" "I saw her," she said, voice paper thin. "A little girl, in the closet." I didn't see anything. I believed that she believed it. The room felt colder, all the same. We grabbed our pillows and a blanket and went to sleep in the car. Facing the front door through the windshield didn't help. Our hearts kept tripping, so we got out for air and stood under the second-story overhang. That's when we looked closer at the supporting post. The base was so rotted the wood fibers had turned into cork dust. The beam wasn't even making contact with the concrete. I pushed the post gently, and it rocked like a loose tooth. Then we noticed the nests, shiny black buttons tucked into webbing under the rot. Black widows. Dozens. We gave up on bravery and slept in the car anyway, fitfully stiff, dreaming of skittering sounds. It was the only night we did that. The next morning we did every cleansing ritual we knew. We scrubbed with vinegar and bleach. We taped bait under the sinks. We bought diatomaceous earth and brushed it behind the fridge like snow. We burned sage and opened every window. The roaches slowed. The smell didn't. The air kept that heavy, suffocating push like the house had a grudge. We brought in a roommate, Miles, to help with rent in the second bedroom. He never paid on time, then stopped paying at all. Somehow it fit. The place felt like a magnet for half measures and apologies. And we stayed. We shouldn't have, but we did. 8 long months of cheap food, Streaming shows, stale beer, and long, gray afternoons that all felt the same. We stopped going places. We stopped talking about plans. We lost track of ourselves. The best thing that happened was when Lena broke up with me. It hurt, and it saved me. I packed what I could and drove back to Orlando with a dented pride and a hollow chest. I rebuilt, slowly, fresh air, real meals, a normal sleep schedule. A year later, I came back for the last sweep. Sorted our old stuff so Lena could grab hers, donated what we didn't want, filled 10 contractor bags, scrubbed until my knuckles cracked. I left that unit cleaner than it had looked in those fake photos. And then the property manager, slick voice, shiny shoes, kept 2/3 of the security deposit I fronted. Excessive wear, they said, like they hadn't handed us a biohazard to begin with. I argued until my throat felt raw. It didn't budge. I cashed the diminished check, swallowed the bitterness, and drove away. Good riddance to Ramblewood Court. If you're listening and you value your sanity, be picky with where you live, demand a showing, take photos, read reviews, and if your warning bells go off at the top of the stairs, listen. Some places you fix, some places fix you, and some places are just trying to keep you tired enough to stay.